Are you a metal collector wondering whether you should slab your metals or not? Well, this is a common question among collectors, and today we'll be addressing that question whether to slab your metals or keep them raw. We'll break down the pros and cons of slabbing so you can decide what works best for you. I'll be sharing the benefits of slabbing and why some collectors prefer to keep their metals raw. Stick around for insights on how slabbing or not can impact your collection. I am Robert, and I've been collecting Exposition Award medals for years. I just recently wrestled with the question whether slabbing my metals is the correct choice for me. I have always bought raw metals, and it wasn't something I really thought about much. As my collection has grown, I'm beginning to see why it may make sense. In this video, we'll cover the key issues to consider. Number 1, protection and preservation. Number 2, authentication and grading. Number 3, display and presentation. And 4, storage and organization. And the fifth and final issue, the resale and legacy planning. Then after considering those issues, you can decide what your personal preference is. And at the end, if you like, I'll share my decision I've made for my own collection and the reasons why. Before we get into the issues, what is a slab? Or a holder, as some may call it. It's a plastic encasement of a coin or metal in this case, done by a grading company like NGC, PCGS, or CAC when one submits their metal to them for grading. So with that in mind, let's go into the first issue. I will name the issue and then the reasons for slabbing, followed by the reasons against slabbing. Key issue number 1, protection and preservation. The points for slabbing under this category is airtight protection against dust, moisture, and fingerprints. Also, it prevents physical damage, scratches, scuffs from handling. Number 3, it keeps metals in pristine condition for the long term. I understand and agree with all these points. Points against slabbing and under the category protection and preservation. I know what that means and what it feels like. Number 2, authentication and grading. For slabbing points would include provides professional authentication and confirms the metal's genuineness. And it may depend on what you're collecting, but fakes can be a problem, especially for a new collector. Number 2, a high-grade slab can increase the market value in making metals more attractive to buyers. I agree with that. A top dealer recently told me metals $300 and over are much easier to sell in a slab. I will add another point. It's going to be very interesting to see the grades on the metals I've sent in for grading and slabbing, even though grading was not the reason I did it. It's kind of exciting. It may get me to pay better attention to what I'm buying. Points against slabbing, authentication, and grading. Some people say grading can be subjective, and you might disagree with the assigned grade. I don't have firsthand experience with this, but I've heard grading companies may differ in their grade assessments. Number 2, the cost of grading may not justify the return, especially for lower value metals. Well, I know the cost is high for submitting to a grading company, especially for metals, and many times you're going to be paying extra fees, like $20 for this oversized holder. On to issue 3, display and presentation. Points for slabbing, easier to handle, store, and display safely without worrying about damaging the metal. Number 2, the uniformity of slabs creates a cleaner and more professional display. More information also, more informative. I've typed up little paper labels on a sheet that I cut up with scissors and labels and put by my metals, and that's not very professional. Metal identification will be much more professional and informative with the rating services label on the holder. One more point I'd like to make under this display issue is that the holder itself, NGC has the oversized holders, which is really what got me interested in the first place in slabbing. They can hold almost any size metal, and they really look good in these. I recently did a video titled NGC Oversized Holder Review, perfect for metals, and I will link to that in the description. Okay, what are some points against slabbing under this issue, display and presentation? Some people say slabs take up more space, and some collectors prefer the aesthetics of the raw metals or the original presentation boxes. Another point against slabbing under presentation is some people say slabs can get scratched and scuffed. I do see their point. I hit one hard with my tripod, fell over. It didn't break anything, but the holder does have its first scuff mark. Next issue is number 4, storage and organization. Points for slabbing under this issue are slab metals can be stored in specialized cases and boxes, making them easier to organize and transport. I've got two large safety deposit boxes, and there is a box available for the NGC oversized holder, but I'm having a hard time finding one available. Another point under storage and organization is that labels and grades are easy to read on slab items, which is great for cataloging. Well, I would say it's also great when showing off your collection too. Okay, points against slabbing. Slabs take up more room and can be bulky, especially for collectors with large collections. Well, I couldn't disagree with that. The fifth and final issue is number 5, resale and legacy planning. The points for slabbing: slab metals are easier to sell and may fetch higher prices. Yep. Point 2, it makes selling or passing on a collection easier since buyers often trust third-party grading. I'm just going to add another comment to this legacy category. I have instructed my wife, if I die first, to contact Stacks and Bowers or Heritage to auction off my collection. Would be much easier to send these slabs in than the raw materials, not to speak about the problems of identifying the metals themselves. So to me, this is a mark in favor of slabbing my metals. Just add another thing. Available metals for sale, it seems to me, are more and more of them are slabbed. So if you rule out buying slab metals, then you could miss out on a great metal you've been chasing. Okay, points against slabbing. Not all metals benefit from being slabbed. Number 6, personal preferences. At the end of the day, this is what it boils down to, because each collector's situation and likes and dislikes are different. So I would like to share with you what experienced metal collector Alan Weinberg said about this issue of whether to slab metals or not. According to the report I read, he said, quote, "There's no strict rule. Whether you slab or keep raw depends on the series, rarity, and collector's personal preference," end quote. So, depends on the series. I guess that's what kind of metals you collect. Rarity and value go together. That makes sense. And your personal preferences. And that's where we are. It's up to you, based on these issues, what's important to you, whether you slab your metals or not. Okay, that's the end of the video, but if you want my opinion about what I decided to do with my metal, stay tuned. So, where do I stand? Well, I've decided to slab certain metals in my collection, especially those that are higher value or have significant historical importance, and those I love just because they're old and pristine condition. The main positive of slabbing my metals, I believe, for me would be the protection of the metals and the ease in handling of the metals. And I think that's going to be worth it for me. I've sent off 26 metals to NGC to be graded and put in these oversized, scratch-resistant holders. What about you? Are you considering slabbing your metals, or do you prefer to keep them raw? Let me know in the comments below. I want to thank you for joining me, and if you'd like to know more about Exposition metals and the history behind them, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for joining me.